So for me, I pretty much knew that I wanted to do product management since after my freshman year of college. When I was at Juicero, that's where I really discovered I loved building products, getting into people's hands, and that product management was probably the ideal position that I could get after college. But the issue was I didn't want to be a computer science major. I knew I didn't want to be a software engineer, so therefore I didn't want to major in it. So that's why I stuck with my business major and minor in computer science. But that also made recruiting for product management junior year, where about 90% of the internships require CS degree, made it a lot harder for me. So the advice that was given to me was essentially you want any product management internship your junior year, and that's going to help open up a lot of the doors for interviews for full-time. And that was the advice I took. So I stayed at ZX Ventures because they offered me a custom internship where they're like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. So that's why I decided to stay. So I did that, and I really was just trying to set myself up for full-time recruiting. And what that looked like was in about early June of my junior internship, so going into the senior year, that's when I started buying prep books and really getting into the process, getting my resources together, getting things together, and looking forward to doing recruiting. So in about July, I started to kind of prepare for interviews. I was probably did maybe 3 mock product interviews that month, and I started doing behavioral interviews probably like once or twice a week, but really that wasn't enough, and I should have done a lot more looking back on it. And then August is when I started to really ramp up, and I was doing almost 1 behavioral interview every day in August to get ready for those phone screens. And then towards the end of August is when I started doing a lot of product interviews, because I was really scared to start those and start doing mock interviews for those, and I was really nervous, so I kept pushing it off, which was a bad idea. And then September was when I really was grinding, and I was doing basically mock product and mock behavioral interviews every single night, and I essentially did that from the beginning of September to the middle of October. And my strategy was take Facebook, for example. I would only prepare for those interviews, and I would prepare for whatever the next upcoming company I had. So Facebook has execution, product, and behavioral. So those were the 3 interviews I was practicing. And I was pushing technical off until I actually got one of those interviews, which really isn't the best strategy. But what I do think that works really well is picking a handful of companies and prepping really, really hard for those handfuls. So my 2 top choices originally going in were Facebook and Lyft, just because when I was doing my networking calls, those were the people that I enjoyed talking to the most and I really got along with. So those are the 2 companies I picked. Also, keep in mind something that you really want, that I was doing and that you also want to do, was in about July, that's when I started doing networking calls and started getting the process of lining up my referrals. And I had a referral for every single company I applied to. So that's kind of what my prep looked like. I had a list of the companies I wanted to apply to. I mapped out my top choices. Facebook and Lyft were the top. And then probably Microsoft was in my right behind them. And in that similar boat was Google, Uber, and any really of the top PM programs. Also, I just want to add that one of the reasons that Facebook and Lyft also were my top choice was because they didn't require a computer science degree, and I was terrified of the technical interview going in. So that was one of the reasons I really liked them. I honestly didn't think I had a shot at Microsoft or Google because I didn't have a CS degree and didn't think I'd have a chance getting an interview, but I ended up getting super lucky, and I got an interview at essentially every single company I applied to. The only things that happened were that, one, I never heard back from Twitter, which I didn't really mind because that wasn't even on my radar. I don't use Twitter. I've never used Twitter, and I've heard they have a horrible culture, and it's not really that great of a company, so I didn't really care about that one. The other one was, and this is a really good thing to keep in mind, was I actually got rejected by Uber at first. I applied and got rejected, and I was really upset because I was afraid I was going to get rejected by other companies. And I ended up getting an interview where everyone else, and I told one of my friends, I was like, oh, I got rejected by Uber. And he's like, that's weird. You definitely should have gotten an interview. So he took it upon himself and set me up with a networking call with the product manager on their autonomous driving team. And he told me, he's like, don't tell him you got rejected. Wait till the end of the call. So I get on the phone call with him, and we have a fantastic 30-minute phone call. He majored in economics at Stanford, didn't have a super technical background, though, but he was the head PM for the autonomous driving team. And we kind of bonded over having that similar background. And then the call, I asked him, I was like, oh, what PM or APM programs do you recommend applying to? He's like, definitely Uber. It's a really good one. I was like, oh, I actually got rejected. He's like, that's weird. You seem like a perfect candidate. Let me talk to HR for you. 2 days later, Uber's HR sends me an apology letter saying that they must have made a mistake. But it's just nuts that their resume scanner probably just skipped mine because I didn't have a CS degree as my major. And they ended up interviewing me anyway and sending like an apology note. And I ended up getting through the case study interview afterwards and got to the phone round. I canceled my on-site, but that's a different story. And so just the note I want you to take away from that is don't give up. Just because you're rejected doesn't mean like it's the end of the story. You might as well try, because the worst thing they're going to do is say no again.